This is a video about unconscious feminine energy. Unconscious feminine energy is the dark side of divine feminine energy, right? That we are unaware of, right? That we are unconscious of. Unconscious is being unaware of something, right? So the first sign of manifested unconscious feminine energy is identifying with feelings, right? Putting so much weight on to feelings, right? Living your life as if your feelings are true, are real, right? 100% real, more real than was being manifested outwardly, right? When it comes to unconscious feminine energy, everything is internal, right? When we're talking about feminine energy, everything is internal, right? We're talking about what happens internally, right? So if we're feeling unbalanced internally, this is unconscious feminine energy first and foremost. So number one is identifying with feelings, right? Identifying with what's going on inside, right? Ignoring what's going on outside, only acknowledging our feelings, right? Instead of acknowledging both what's going on outside and what's going on inside, right? We're only acknowledging our feelings, and we're only acknowledging that our feelings are true and are the be all and end all of reality, right? Another thing is using these emotions, these unbalanced emotions, to manipulate other people into doing what you want them to do, right? So instead of expressing what is bothering you, expressing um, what you need to express inside of you, right? You're unconsciously using these emotions to make other people feel guilty. You're unconsciously making using these emotions to make other people feel shame. Um, you're unconsciously using these emotions to seduce other people into doing your bidding, right? This is using your emotions to manipulate other people, right? Another thing, how another way uh, unconscious feminine energy manifests is through victim mentality, right? Always, always, always placing yourself as a victim in any situation. Not even always, but um, just putting yourself in a position of the victim in every situation, right? I know some situations um, you can say you are the actual victim, but some people are so good at actually manipulating their way into being the victim in a situation, right? So that's one way it manifests. Another way of being in the victim mentality it manifests is you're like you're waiting for you're waiting for other people to rescue you, right? You're waiting for other people to help you out. You're waiting for your savior or your saviors to rescue you in a situation, right? You manipulate yourself being in certain positions to be the victim so that other people could come and save you or rescue you in a situation, right? That's being in the victim mentality, right? Another way unconscious feminine energy manifests is repressing anger, right? Again, this plays down into emotions and feelings when it comes to feminine energy. Repressing anger might be seen as too masculine, right? The expression of anger might be seen as too masculine, and so you in turn you might want to portray yourself as being very feminine, right? Or portray yourself as a victim per se, or someone who's an empath, right? So instead of expressing what you're actually feeling, in this case anger, you're repressing that emotion, right? And it transforms into resentment. right? When we're not expressing our anger, it transforms into resentment, right? Where um, the anger expresses itself anyway, but in a different form, right? But but we're not noticing that. We're not conscious of that. We're not aware of that, right? Passive passive aggressiveness is another way unconscious feminine energy manifests, right? Again, that has to do with emotion. It has to do with repressing your feelings, especially anger, right? Especially anger, right? If we're repressing our anger, right, and expressing it unconsciously, right, through resentment, it's gonna come out passive aggressively, right? It's gonna come out passive aggressively in ways where you feel like you're being nice, polite to other people, but deep down you're being hurtful to other people, right? You're trying to dress your how should I say, your anger, your resentment, um, in nice clothing, right? You're trying to dress your anger in politeness and niceness, right? So through it expresses through passive uh, passive aggressiveness, right? Which is expression of resentment, right? Fear of structure, right, is another one, right? Fear of structure. So that could be just rejecting masculinity, period, right? Um, which is another end of the spectrum, right? Rejecting masculinity, period. You may have this might come from you just having some certain issues with masculinity, um, through trauma and not looking at it or not dealing with it in some certain way, right? So you fear structure, you fear you just reject anything that's masculine, right? You're rejecting something that will give you direction, right? You're rejecting something that will allow yourself to hold your creativity, right? To give your creativity direction. You're rejecting things that will hold your femininity, right? Because femininity is flowing, right? It's all about flowing, right? So when you reject your masculine, your 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 emotions have no direction, right? Your emotions are all over the place. That's why you're so identified with emotion and feelings. That's why you're so manipulative with your emotions and feelings. That's why you try to hold your emotion of anger, but it still comes out anyway, right? So fear structure and rejecting the masculine, right? Rejecting the expression of anger is one way that it shows up, because in our minds sometimes the expression of anger could be could be labeled as a masculine trait, right? But expressions of emotions are are something that balances out our energies, right? Another thing is over dependence, right? Over dependence on other people, over dependence on the external world, right? This can be connected to the the victim mentality, where you're waiting for someone to save you, you're waiting for someone to rescue you, you're looking for other people to help you, you're looking for other people to rescue you, like I said. So over dependence is just constantly looking for validation, right? You're constantly looking for validation from other people, right? Just to feed your ego, right? To sustain your identity that you created in your mind, right? That's over dependence on the external world, right? Another way unconscious feminine energy um, manifests is it could come out in a spiritual way. So spiritual bypassing, right? Avoiding your dark side, right? I already mentioned what unconscious feminine energy is, right? Unconscious feminine energy is the dark side of divine, we'll call it divine feminine energy, right? Right, the dark side of spiritual of dark side of feminine energy, right, is unconscious feminine energy, where you are, let's say, you are conscious of these things. You're conscious of all these things that I'm listing off of, right? You're conscious that you need to work on all these things, but you refuse to look at these things. You refuse to take accountability of these things that are within you, and you project it out. Right, you project it out onto other people, right? Instead of taking accountability for all these things I'm listing out on, right? You see this in the spiritual community a lot, where people see all these things, see all these issues that people are dealing with, but they refuse to work. They refuse to work on these things themselves, right? They refuse to take accountability for all these things that are listing out on, right? Um, Perfectionism is another one. Perfectionism, right? um, a lot of women these days will say woman, but feminine energy is not gender specific. But I'm just giving you an example. So a lot of women these days are chasing this perfectionism when it comes to their physical appearance, right? That's one way it has manifested, right? That's one way it manifests, right? Perfectionism. Another way it could look is always waiting for the the perfect time to create something, or always looking for the wrong things in anything, right? Instead of looking at something that is already perfect, you're always looking for something wrong about something wrong about anything, right? You're always looking at the negative sides of anything, instead of um, ins- instead of looking the positive side of things, right? Uh, Distorted intuition is the last one. Distorted intuition. What is that? That is where you are you are kind of like denying reality in a way. You're denying what things are, because you're so far like in the clouds, I would say. I'm trying to give this imagery. You're so far in the clouds. You're not grounded in reality, right? You're just you find this a lot in the spiritual community, where I'm going to try to explain this. You find this heavily in this spiritual community, where people can become so spiritual that they deny the material world, let's just say, or what's actually happening on earth. Like they want to avoid what's actually happening on earth, right? The problems, the issues, they don't want to face that. They want to be so spiritual. They want to be so above all the problems on in this world, right? They want to they want to be stuck in fantasy, right? And it's and it kind of they believe that that's like the they believe that's like the ending of all knowing, right? They believe that's the ending of all knowing, meaning like that's there's no more there, there's nothing else that needs to be done, right? Instead of actually facing what's going on in the world, actually facing was the core issues in the world. They don't want to acknowledge those things. They want to be stuck in the spiritual world, right? Away from the material world. They want to be stuck in that place, right? because they feel like that's the only knowing that needs to be done, right? Thank you for watching this video.